They laughed at me the moment I stepped into the wedding hall. Whispers followed me like a shadow, eyes darting from me to my little boy, Mason. I could hear snippets of conversations. Can you believe she's here? A single mom at Trevor's wedding? It stung, of course, but I reminded myself why I was there. I wasn't going to let their judgment shake me. Mason held my hand tightly, looking up with wide eyes, and I forced a smile, knowing I had to stay strong for him. Trevor, my ex, spotted us almost immediately. He looked surprised but tried to hide it with a polite nod. I could see that little spark of recognition, maybe even guilt, flicker in his eyes for a brief moment. It was strange to feel that mix of anger and pity all at once. He had walked away from me when I needed him most, leaving me to figure out life with a tiny human depending on me. And now, here he was, all smiles and charm, about to marry someone else while pretending nothing ever happened. As I walked down the aisle of chairs, I noticed Trevor's family watching me. His mother, Diane, gave a subtle smirk, while his sister, Vanessa, whispered something into her friend's ear. I could feel their judgment like a weight on my shoulders, but I refused to shrink. I held my head high, straightened my back, and focused on Mason. My son's small hand in mine reminded me why I had to be strong. He deserved a mom who could rise above cruelty, not one who crumbled under it. The hall itself was lavish, with crystal chandeliers and flowers in every corner. Everything screamed perfection, the kind of perfection Trevor liked to chase in life while avoiding responsibility. I had to admit, seeing him look so comfortable in a setting he used to brag about hurt a little. But it wasn't about me feeling sorry for myself anymore. I had worked hard to build a life that was mine, a life where Mason and I felt safe, loved, and proud. I found a seat near the back, keeping a careful eye on everything. Trevor tried to wave me over later, but I shook my head gently. I could smile politely without letting him close. I realized that strength wasn't about confrontation. It was about showing them I didn't need their approval. Watching the guests mingle, I noticed people casting curious glances, whispering behind their hands. Some were surprised to see me, but I could sense a shift. Perhaps they didn't realize that being a single mom didn't mean being weak. Perhaps they didn't know the work, the struggles, the sleepless nights, and the victories that came with surviving alone. I was proof. Through it all, Mason stayed close, pointing at decorations with excitement and asking questions about the ceremony. I laughed softly, feeling a warmth that no judgment could touch. In that moment, I knew I was exactly where I needed to be. I wasn't just a single mom walking into a wedding. I was a mother who had survived, thrived, and was ready to face whatever came next with grace. No one could take that from me, and deep down, I think even Trevor noticed. The wedding hall was stunning. Soft lights reflected off crystal chandeliers, and delicate flowers lined the aisle, filling the room with a gentle fragrance. Olivia took a deep breath as she stepped through the doors, holding Mason's hand tightly. Her dress was simple yet elegant, a soft navy blue that hugged her in all the right places without being flashy. She wanted to look presentable, confident, and composed, exactly what she felt inside. As soon as she entered, she felt the shift in the room. Conversations paused and heads turned. Some eyes held curiosity, others judgment. Whispers began circulating immediately. Isn't that Trevor's ex? She's a single mom, right? Olivia's stomach tightened, but she forced herself to stay calm. She could feel the weight of Diane's stare, sharp and calculating, and Vanessa's smirk as she nudged a friend. The air was thick with unspoken comments and opinions, all directed at her. Mason, sensing the tension, tugged on her hand nervously. "Mom, why are they staring at us?" he whispered. Olivia bent slightly and smiled warmly, brushing a strand of hair from his face. "Don't worry, baby," she said softly. "We're just here to enjoy the day. Just you and me, okay?" Mason nodded, his small hand squeezing hers, and she felt a surge of protective pride. She walked slowly down the hall, keeping her posture straight and her head high. Every step was deliberate. She didn't rush, but she didn't linger either. She noticed some guests whispering to each other, exchanging glances, probably expecting her to falter or look uncomfortable. But she didn't. She gave polite nods when people looked directly at her, her calm demeanor a quiet statement that she wasn't here to fight or explain herself. Diane approached briefly, her lips tight and eyes sharp. "Olivia," she said, her tone polite but icy. "It's nice to see you." Olivia smiled faintly and replied, "Thank you. Congratulations to Trevor and Hannah." Diane's eyebrows lifted ever so slightly, but she said nothing more, retreating quickly. Vanessa rolled her eyes, muttering under her breath, but Olivia ignored it. She refused to give them any satisfaction. Finding a seat near the back, Olivia settled Mason on her lap for a moment, letting him adjust. She looked around the room, observing the setup, the guests, and the nervous energy that seemed to ripple through the family. She realized that while they were busy judging her, she was in control of her own life. She had Mason, she had her career, and she had her self-respect. As the ceremony began, Olivia held Mason close, feeling his warmth and innocence. She knew that no matter what anyone thought, she had already won in the most important ways. Her presence there was more than attendance. It was a quiet assertion of strength, resilience, and dignity. And while the whispers continued, she felt a calm confidence she hadn't felt in years. This was her moment, her statement, and she wasn't about to let anyone ruin it. Trevor noticed Olivia almost immediately, his eyes widening for a moment before he forced a polite smile. He started walking toward her, taking slow steps as if trying to appear casual. When he reached her, he extended a hand awkwardly. "Olivia," he said, his voice careful. I never meant for things to get messy. I hope you've been okay." Olivia nodded politely, keeping her hand firmly around Mason's. "I've been doing well, thank you," she replied softly, careful not to let any emotion show. She wanted to be civil, but she also didn't want to invite any conversation that could reopen old wounds. Her life had moved forward without him, and she didn't intend to give him a chance to stir up the past. As she spoke to him, memories flickered through her mind. She remembered being 19, scared and unprepared when she discovered she was pregnant. Trevor had seemed distant at first, then impatient, and finally gone. He had left her to handle everything alone: medical appointments, financial struggles, sleepless nights, and the constant worry of raising a child by herself. At the time, it had felt like her world was crumbling, like no one could understand the weight on her shoulders. She remembered how she had cried on the floor of their tiny apartment, clutching her stomach, wishing he would stay, wishing he would care. But he didn't. He moved on quickly, dating freely, enjoying his 20s, never once checking in on Mason or the life they could have had together. And while he built a carefree life for himself, Olivia fought through every challenge, learned to survive, and eventually started to thrive. Hearing him speak now, she realized how little he understood about what she had endured. He sounded casual, as if their past was a minor inconvenience, something easily forgotten. But Olivia had grown stronger, more resilient, and more independent than she had ever imagined possible. She didn't need his approval or his apology. She had built a life filled with love, stability, and pride, and that was more than he could claim. Trevor glanced at Mason, who was quietly holding her hand, his small face curious and trusting. Olivia felt a protective surge and tightened her grip. She knew Mason didn't need Trevor. He had a mother who was strong enough to be both parents if necessary. Trevor's smile faltered slightly, as if he sensed something had changed. Olivia stayed composed, polite, but distant. She didn't want to give him the satisfaction of seeing any pain or hesitation in her. She had already moved on emotionally, and this encounter would not shake her. After a moment, she nodded again and said, "I should let you get back to your guests." Trevor looked disappointed, but didn't protest. Olivia turned to Mason and whispered, "Let's find our seats, baby." As they walked away, she felt lighter, freer. The past was still there, but it no longer controlled her. She had survived, and she was stronger than the man who had left her behind. As the ceremony ended and guests mingled, Olivia noticed a small table set up with pamphlets and bid sheets. A sign announced a charity auction to raise money for a children's hospital. She paused, reading through the items and hearing the excited chatter around her. It was a good cause, something that mattered deeply, especially to her as a mother. She quietly approached the table, Mason by her side, and glanced around. No one was paying much attention to her yet. Olivia picked up a bid sheet and wrote down a generous amount, making sure to leave her name off. She wanted the impact to be felt, but the attention directed elsewhere. It wasn't about recognition. It was about showing quietly, without fanfare, that she could make a difference while staying true to herself. As she returned to her seat, she noticed the murmurs starting among the guests. People were whispering excitedly about the unusually large donation. "Wow, that's incredibly generous," someone said. "Who would give that much?" Trevor's mother, Diane, was the first to raise her eyebrows, glancing around as if trying to identify the mysterious benefactor. Vanessa leaned toward her, curiosity written all over her face. The whispers grew louder as everyone tried to figure out who could be behind such generosity. Olivia kept her expression calm, her lips curved into a faint, knowing smile. Inside, she felt a sense of quiet satisfaction. She didn't need anyone to know it was her. The act itself was enough. She was silently proving that her life had substance, that she could act with kindness and impact while those who judged her were caught up in shallow perceptions. Mason tugged gently at her sleeve. "Mom, did I do good?" he asked, his voice small and hopeful. Olivia chuckled softly and ruffled his hair. "Yes, baby. You did very good. That's helping other kids who need it. I'm proud of you." She loved that he shared in her sense of purpose, even in small ways. Meanwhile, Trevor's family continued to whisper and speculate. Diane's expression was unreadable, but Olivia could feel a tension in the air. Vanessa's smirk had faded into a puzzled frown. Trevor himself looked distracted, scanning the room for the person responsible. Olivia watched him, calm and composed, knowing he had no idea she was the one behind the generosity. The rest of the evening went on with laughter, speeches, and music, but the quiet ripple she had created lingered. Guests continued discussing the mysterious donor, admiration mixed with curiosity. Olivia felt a subtle victory. She hadn't confronted anyone, hadn't caused drama, yet she had made her presence felt in the most meaningful way possible. As she held Mason close and watched the room from a distance, she realized that revenge didn't have to be loud or vindictive. Sometimes it was about showing strength through action, grace, and intelligence. And in that moment, she knew she had accomplished exactly that. Dinner was served, and the hall buzzed with conversation and clinking glasses. Olivia and Mason sat near the back, quietly enjoying their food while keeping an eye on the main table. The bride, Hannah, stood up with her glass raised, and everyone turned their attention to her. "Trevor has always been the perfect man," Hannah began, her smile wide and practiced. "He's lucky to have such a stable, loving family, and I'm so grateful to be part of it all." The guests clapped politely, some cheering lightly, and Trevor smiled, clearly enjoying the praise. Olivia listened quietly, nodding along as if the words were just background noise. Then Hannah leaned slightly toward a friend beside her, speaking just loud enough for Olivia to catch. "I still don't understand how anyone could waste time on a single mom," she said, her voice dripping with judgment. "It's like damaged goods, don't you think?" Olivia felt her stomach tighten. Anger surged through her, hot and sharp. She could feel Mason's hand squeeze hers, and she took a deep breath to steady herself. She looked around the table and saw Trevor laughing along with Hannah, completely unaware of the sting behind her words. Everyone else seemed caught up in the celebration, oblivious to the cruelty in the comment. Olivia felt the familiar ache of betrayal, the old wound from when Trevor had left her suddenly mingling with this new insult from the woman he was about to marry. For a moment, she considered confronting Hannah, telling her exactly what she thought of her arrogance and ignorance. But then Olivia realized that fighting wouldn't prove anything. It would only create drama, and drama was something she didn't need. She didn't have to defend herself to people who judged without understanding. Her strength wasn't in arguing. It was in living, thriving, and showing them what they had underestimated. Instead, Olivia shifted her focus inward. She reminded herself of everything she had accomplished since Trevor walked out of her life. She thought about Mason, the small apartment they had made a home, the business she had built from scratch, and the nights she had stayed up worrying but never gave up. She had survived without anyone's approval, and that survival had made her strong. Her anger began to fade, replaced by a quiet determination. She would let her actions speak louder than their words. The generosity she had shown at the charity auction, the life she had built, and the calm dignity with which she carried herself were all stronger than any insult Hannah could throw. Mason tugged at her sleeve and asked softly, "Mom, are they being mean?" Olivia smiled gently, brushing his hair from his forehead. "Some people don't understand, baby," she said. "But that's okay. We know the truth, and that's all that matters." As the dinner continued, Olivia stayed composed, enjoying her meal and Mason's company. Inside, she felt a quiet sense of victory. She didn't need words or confrontation. Her strength, her resilience, and her life were already the proof she needed. And in that room full of judgment and whispers, she silently vowed that she would continue to rise above it all. Olivia watched the room quietly, Mason playing with a small toy on her lap, and her mind drifted back over the past 5 years. She remembered the early days after Trevor left, how scared she had been, how uncertain life felt with a tiny baby depending entirely on her. Nights were long and exhausting, filled with worry about money, bills, and how she would provide for Mason. But even in those hard moments, she had made a promise to herself. She would not let anyone break her spirit. She remembered the first job she took after school, working long hours for little pay, just to make ends meet. She juggled shifts while caring for Mason, often falling asleep on the couch after feeding him dinner and putting him to bed. The days were exhausting, but each small paycheck was a step toward independence, a step toward proving to herself that she could survive and even thrive on her own. Returning to school had been another challenge. At night, she studied while Mason slept, poring over textbooks and taking notes on the dining table. The stress was immense, and there were times when she wanted to give up. But she didn't. She kept pushing, knowing that her efforts were building a better life for both of them. She earned her degree and felt a pride she had never imagined possible, a pride that no one could take away. Once she finished school, Olivia decided to start a small business from home. It wasn't easy at first. There were late nights, countless mistakes, and moments of doubt. But gradually, her efforts paid off. Her business grew, bringing in steady income and giving her the flexibility to care for Mason while still pursuing her dreams. She finally felt in control of her life, financially and emotionally, and that control brought a sense of freedom she had never known when Trevor had been around. Buying her own apartment was a milestone that filled her with pride. She had worked hard, saved every dollar she could, and finally had a place that was truly hers and Mason's. It was cozy, warm, and full of little touches that reflected her personality. A space where they could both feel safe and happy. She had built a home without relying on anyone, and every corner reminded her of the life she had created from scratch. Through all of this, Olivia had changed. Her confidence was solid, her self-worth unshakable. She no longer sought approval from anyone, nor did she let their opinions dictate her life. She had learned that real revenge wasn't about hurting others. It was about thriving despite them, about building a life so full and strong that no one could ever question her value. Now, sitting at the wedding, watching the family that had once judged her, Olivia felt a quiet satisfaction. She had survived betrayal, hardship, and doubt. She had grown stronger, smarter, and more independent. This, her life, her strength, and her happiness, was the revenge she didn't need to announce. They had underestimated her, and she had flourished right under their noses. The ceremony reached its peak, with everyone standing and the soft music fading as the officiant prepared to guide Trevor and Hannah through their vows. The room held a hushed anticipation. Olivia sat quietly, Mason fidgeting beside her, and she watched the couple closely. Everything seemed perfect on the surface, but she sensed the tension building. Suddenly, the officiant paused, clearing his throat as if sensing something unusual. Trevor's hand twitched slightly, and then he took a deep breath, stepping forward. "Before I marry Hannah," he said, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear, "there's something I need to reveal about my past." The hall went completely silent, all eyes turning toward him. Even the musicians had stopped playing, waiting for what he would say next. Trevor swallowed and continued. "I have a debt, one that I've been hiding for years. If it ever came out, it could ruin my family financially. It's a mistake I made long ago, and I've tried to manage it quietly, but it's time the truth was known." His face grew tense, and his hands shook slightly as he admitted the secret. Gasps filled the room. Diane's face turned pale, her lips pressed tightly together, and Vanessa's eyes widened in shock. Whispers broke out as the guests murmured among themselves, struggling to process the news. Some looked at Trevor with disbelief, others with worry. The air, once filled with celebration, now felt heavy with tension and unease. Olivia stayed calm, Mason tucked closely against her. She didn't need to speak or react. She simply watched, a small, quiet smile tugging at her lips. This was karma unfolding in a way she could never have planned, yet it was so precise. Trevor had left her and underestimated her. But now, in front of everyone who once judged her, he was the one facing humiliation and uncertainty. She noticed Hannah's expression change from excitement to confusion, then fear. The bride who had seemed so certain now looked unsure, her perfect wedding moment tainted by the revelation. Trevor's family whispered frantically among themselves, trying to process the impact of his confession. Diane's hands trembled slightly as she clutched her clutch, and Vanessa's confident smirk had completely disappeared. No one looked at Olivia. They didn't know she had been watching, quietly observing everything unfold. But in her mind, she savored the moment with subtle satisfaction. This wasn't her doing, but she recognized it as a turning point. Life had a way of balancing itself, and she had survived betrayal and judgment only to witness the truth exposing itself at the right time. She held Mason's hand tightly, feeling a deep sense of peace. She had been strong, resilient, and patient. And now, while Trevor and his family faced the consequences of hidden mistakes, she stood untouched by the chaos, steady in her confidence and proud of the life she had built. The whispers, the shock, and the tension were all a reminder that real strength and integrity always shine through, and that sometimes the universe has its own way of delivering justice. The room was thick with tension. Trevor's family exchanged worried glances, unsure of what to say or how to react. Diane's face was tight with anxiety, and Vanessa shifted uncomfortably in her seat, whispering something to a friend. Trevor stood frozen, his confident composure slipping as he realized how exposed he was in front of everyone. Olivia sat quietly, Mason leaning against her side. She didn't speak, didn't move more than necessary. Instead, she simply held Mason's hand firmly, her calm demeanor a stark contrast to the chaos around her. Her eyes briefly met Trevor's, steady and unflinching. There was no anger, no accusation, just clarity. She let the silence do the work, letting the truth he had revealed speak for itself. Guests began to notice the difference immediately. While Trevor had built a carefully curated image of a perfect life, Olivia's life had quietly flourished without spectacle. Her calm, poised presence, her confidence, and the quiet strength she radiated told a story that no words could match. People looked at her with a new understanding, seeing her not as the single mom they had whispered about earlier, but as a woman who had endured, thrived, and maintained her dignity against every challenge. Trevor shifted uncomfortably, realizing that while he had sought approval and admiration all these years, Olivia had earned hers without needing anyone to validate her. The guests murmured quietly, glances moving between Olivia and Trevor, and some began to reassess the assumptions they had made about her. The contrast was clear. One life built on appearances and secrets, the other built on hard work, integrity, and resilience. Mason tugged lightly at her hand, and Olivia gave him a small, reassuring squeeze. "It's okay, baby," she whispered softly. He smiled, sensing her calm and strength. In that moment, she felt a surge of pride, not for revenge, not for triumph over Trevor, but for the quiet certainty that she had done right by herself and by her son. Trevor's family was no longer sure where their loyalty should lie. Diane's lips pressed tightly together, her worry unmistakable, and Vanessa's expression shifted from smug confidence to uncertainty. Hannah looked at Trevor with confusion and hesitation, her perfect vision of the wedding and the future suddenly clouded. Everyone began to realize that Olivia's life, though different from theirs, carried a weight of honesty and perseverance that could not be faked. Olivia stayed poised, never raising her voice or showing any sign of satisfaction. She didn't need to. Her presence, her quiet strength, and the life she had built were proof enough. The whispers, the stares, the reassessment of assumptions. All of it flowed naturally, like the universe was finally giving her the recognition she had earned silently over the years. As the ceremony resumed, Olivia focused on Mason, keeping her calm and collected. She had no words for Trevor or his family, no explanations to offer. Her life and actions had spoken louder than any confrontation could. In that poised silence, she had shown everyone who truly had strength, dignity, and integrity. And in that moment, she felt unshakable, confident that nothing could touch the life she had worked so hard to build. The ceremony ended, but the mood in the hall had completely shifted. Guests whispered in small groups, some casting curious glances at Trevor and his family, others shaking their heads in disbelief. The air that had been filled with celebration now felt heavy with tension. Hannah stood off to the side, glaring at Trevor, her arms crossed tightly. She spoke to him in hushed but angry tones, clearly confronting him about the secret he had revealed. Olivia watched quietly, understanding without needing to hear the details. Trevor's carefully constructed image was crumbling before everyone's eyes. Trevor's family looked around, unsettled and uncertain. Diane's expression was unreadable, but the tightness in her jaw betrayed her worry. Vanessa whispered to a friend, her usual confidence gone, replaced by doubt and unease. They began questioning the choices Trevor had made over the years, and even some guests looked at him with a mixture of disbelief and disappointment. The respect and admiration he had once commanded seemed to vanish in that moment, leaving only the reality of his mistakes exposed. Olivia shifted Mason gently in her lap, feeling his small hand tug at hers. It was time to leave. She had no desire to linger and watch the drama unfold further. She stood slowly, smoothing her dress and offering a polite nod to a few guests she passed. She kept Mason close, his tiny hand in hers, and walked toward the exit with a quiet confidence. Every step felt like a small victory, a silent declaration that they were moving forward on their own terms. Outside, the cool evening air felt refreshing after the tense atmosphere inside. Olivia took a deep breath, letting it fill her lungs and calm the lingering tension. Mason looked up at her with wide, trusting eyes. She bent slightly and hugged him tightly, feeling his warmth and innocence. "We did it, baby," she whispered softly. "We're free and stronger than ever." Mason hugged her back, and for a moment the world felt calm, safe, and theirs alone. They walked toward their car, leaving the chaos behind, Olivia's mind replaying the events of the evening. She thought about the whispers, the judging eyes, and the tension in Trevor's family. But most of all, she thought about how far they had come. She had faced betrayal, judgment, and hardship, yet here she was, standing tall, proud of the life she had built for herself and Mason. As they drove away from the venue, Olivia glanced at her son, his small face peaceful and content. She realized that the evening had been more than a wedding. It had been a moment of closure. Trevor and his family had revealed their true colors, but she had remained composed, graceful, and unwavering. She had not only survived the judgment, but had also emerged stronger, her integrity and confidence intact. For the first time in a long time, Olivia felt completely at peace. She knew they could face whatever challenges came next because they had already overcome so much. She held Mason's hand tightly and smiled, ready to leave the past behind and embrace the future they would create together. As Olivia sat with Mason that evening, the quiet hum of the city outside their apartment window, she reflected on everything that had happened. The wedding, Trevor's betrayal, the judgment from his family, and the whispers of the guests, all of it played through her mind. She thought about the fear she had felt when she was left alone with a newborn, unsure of how to survive. She remembered the nights of tears, the struggles of making ends meet, and the heavy weight of feeling abandoned and underestimated. But she also thought about the journey she had taken since then. Every challenge had shaped her, every setback had strengthened her, and every long day had built resilience she never knew she had. She remembered going back to school, working multiple jobs, and slowly building a business that allowed her and Mason a life of stability and comfort. Each step had been difficult, but it had been hers, and it had been worth it. Olivia realized that her real revenge had never been about confronting Trevor or proving him wrong. It wasn't about making him feel ashamed or exposing his secrets to the world. Her revenge had been living her life fully, honestly, and with strength that no one could take away. Every moment she had built for herself and Mason, every small victory, and every act of kindness and integrity had been proof that she could rise above the cruelty and judgment of others. She thought about the subtle moments at the wedding, the anonymous donation to the children's hospital, staying calm while Trevor's lies and secrets were revealed, and walking away with dignity. Those moments had shown her power in a way that anger or confrontation never could. She understood now that true strength was quiet, steady, and unshakable. It didn't need applause or recognition. It simply existed, undeniable to anyone who tried to underestimate it. Mason stirred beside her, and she smiled, brushing a strand of hair from his face. He was the reason she had endured everything, the reason she had pushed herself to grow and succeed. Her love for him had given her courage, determination, and a sense of purpose that no betrayal could shake. Watching him sleep peacefully, she felt a calm pride in the life they had created together. Her final reflection was simple but profound. Life had its own way of balancing things. Trevor and his family had been exposed in ways they couldn't control, but she had never sought to orchestrate it. She had simply lived her life, and life had delivered justice quietly, naturally. "They tried to shame me," she whispered softly, "but I became unshakable." Sometimes the best revenge isn't about hurting anyone. It's about showing them you're unstoppable. Olivia leaned back, taking a deep breath, and felt a weight lift off her shoulders. She had survived betrayal, proven her worth, and built a future filled with love, stability, and strength. The past no longer had power over her. She and Mason were free, stronger than ever, and ready for whatever came next, confident that life would continue to reward honesty, resilience, and courage.